So another thing that you were saying before was about signal processing. I mean, in terms of everyone's using the same kind of plugins and stuff like this, you get these amp simulators and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And people will tend towards the presets all sound great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
But that doesn't make a great record.
No.
One good sound doesn't make a great record. A record is one sound, which is a combination of X number of sounds.
Yeah.
And so dropping down a load of presets ain't, it's never going to make you a great record.
Right, and I've noticed this myself since initially we had this conversation. I've been listening to some modern production jobs, and I'm like, yep, I know that sound.
Yeah.
I know that sound. If the sounds are just, if you want something to sound a particular way, it's effortless to get it to sound that way.
Yeah. Effortless.
Right.
There's no input. All you do is click. Oh, it's done. Oh, that's great.
Right.
But there's no input. There's too much. There's been too much times thinking it's all give me convenience or give me death. Analog, the way I do things is not convenient. It's just not convenient. So you have to actually input some effort into making a record. I can't be bothered to make records that have no effort put in by the band. And I, if I want to make my own record, I'll put the effort in, whether I'm working on digital or not. But I'm not putting a load of effort in to make someone else's record for them. They have to put the effort in. They have to get the stuff right. They have to make it sound right and feel right and do all that. They have to. And analog, working on analog, actually forces people to do that.
Right.
Because it isn't just a drop-down menu to get your guitar sound. You have to go in and set up. Well, even if you're using a DI, some sort of guitar effect DI box, you still have to set it up. It still has to come into the recorder. It still has to sound. You still have to think about the sound. You don't just go click bang, it's there. And that actual engagement in the process makes all the difference, and that's why the records hang together more coherently and mean something more than they do when it's just a computer.
So you're saying basically it forces creativity, it forces another level of creative input.
Yeah.
Because you've got to listen.
Yeah, you've got to listen, you've got to know, you've got to have a fairly good idea of what you want. Which is again something that I try to, as soon as I start talking to a band about doing something, I start trying to bring out of them what it is they're actually wanting. And then I'll try and, I go out of my way to facilitate that.
Yeah.
And everything they say to me, I'm listening to. Because they're telling me stuff they don't even know they're telling me.
So do you find that when bands come in, they have a clear idea of what they want mostly, or is that something that is an essential part of the process for you to work with them, getting that kind of clarity around stuff?
It varies, but in general it will develop throughout the session, at least up to a point. I mean, before I start recording, I tend to try to have, with the group, all of us are trying to focus on doing one thing. We'll have discussed it, and we try to get a focus on it, so that we're all actually aiming for the same thing. Because otherwise there's no way of quantifying the result. If you sort of just throw a load of stuff up in the air and hope it comes down in a nice shape. Whereas if you go in thinking, right, we want to make a record that's like this, that has this quality and that quality and has this, I hesitate to say sounds like. But because when someone says we want to sound like this, what I will generally think when they say that is, okay, they talk about a band, say, we want to sound like, I don't know, Pink Floyd, circa Dark Side of the Moon. The certain qualities of that record, that's what I take that to mean. That's how my brain analyses that information. I think, okay, so you don't want to sound like Pink Floyd. That's not actually what you're telling me. You're telling me that you want certain qualities in your recording. that come from that. And I mean, a lot of the time I think people don't even realise they're telling you that. But that's what I take. And then you've got sort of 4 or 5 guys or girls and they're saying, yeah, we like this, we like that. You know, all that stuff goes into the melting pot. And I listen to that, and then what, you know, then I may say, well, okay, how about let's make a record with these qualities. And then once we agree on the qualities, you've actually got something that you can quantify. That it tells me stuff about, you know, the sound and the sort of general overall end effect that people want. And then by the time you start recording, hopefully everyone's on relatively the same page with that. Because without that information, without everybody being on the same page, you're unlikely to get a good result. The result could be brilliant. In fact, technically, it could be fantastic. But if you're all aiming to achieve the same thing, you can, you can achieve or you don't. But if you're all aiming, if you don't know what you're aiming to achieve, come to the point where you stick it on and listen to it. How can you possibly know if you've achieved it if you didn't know what you were setting out to achieve in the first place?
Yeah. And I guess if you're working with a band, you could have 5 different opinions about what it was supposed to sound like. So if people haven't come together on that, then someone's going to be disappointed.
Yeah. Whereas in fact, what I find, generally speaking, I found this for a long time, because of the way I approach things, that rarely happens. You know, and I mean, it's also a natural thing to me that as soon as you finished a project, the next one you'd do different. Of course you would, because you learnt a lot from doing that project, and you'd have learned a huge amount from the first project. So of course the next one would do different. And if that one, you know, if this one was the best thing you were ever going to do, might as well go home. So you know, there's a progression. There's a progression element in it as well. And understanding, I think it's important that people understand what they're doing in the moment, as opposed to trying to think it's a definitive thing. You know, a band is an ongoing thing. I mean, they can last a very short time or a very long time. But to coin a phrase, they're never really the final version of themselves, are they? Bands, they develop. I mean, you get some bands that will do the same thing, like AC/DC is a great example of a band that will do the same thing for centuries and still be great. But most of the time, I mean, if you look at Smashing Pumpkins, let's take Smashing Pumpkins. If you look at their career, through everything, I mean, they've done a lot of different things. But there's a commonality between all their records. But that's kind of another story. But there is a commonality between all their records. And in stuff, indeed, other stuff that various members of the band has been involved in. There's a commonality there, which stretches through their whole career, despite the fact all their records sound different. And that's one of the things that I tend to capture with bands. So you know, if I do an album with a band and I do another album with a band, the chances of those albums sounding the same are virtually zero. And really that's how it should be. But there will be a commonality between the 2 records. You know, it's 2 singles or what, you know, it doesn't matter. If I work with bands more than once, the records will sound different. Yeah. And so they should. But there will be a commonality there, which gives the whole volume of work a coherence. But that comes from the band.